All right. Well, we're so happy that you were able to join us tonight. I'm Kirsten Bannister, and I'm the treasurer and the events coordinator for this Shoreline Special Needs PTA. We will soon be changing our name to the Shoreline Special Education PTA. Our PTA supports caregivers of disabled and special education students, and we strive to create a community of both to support both caregivers along with and create partnership with the school district. You can find information about our district-wide PTA on Facebook, Instagram, and our website, shorelineспecialneedspta.org. What our panel tonight is here to make sure that you have all your questions answered about how high school special education is the same and different from middle school special education, and how the focus changes with graduation being the finish line at this school. We also want to help facilitate connections with the new high school administrators you and your students will be in touch with next year. We're recording our meeting tonight, and we'll upload the video to YouTube so families can translate the video in their preferred language and are able in their preferred language. Because of this, for caregivers, we ask that you put your questions in the chat box and that you keep any questions or comments as non-identifying as possible. Please don't use your child's name, their age, what school they attend, what teachers they currently have, and any specific diagnosis your child might have. So at this time, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with parents. One of our parents, Katie Rose, she is, believe it or not, her internet went out today, of course. So the thing that I didn't worry about happened. So she hopefully will be able to join us. But she has an 11-year-old or 11th grader in a self-contained classroom. So Courtney, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Courtney Shuey, and I have a freshman who is in just Gen Pop classes. And she previously went to Einstein, and it was a little bit of a weird transition because she's one of those kids who got caught in the COVID shutdown. So I'll do the best to answer questions that I can, but just keep in mind that there was that little bit of awkwardness to our transition from middle school to high school.
And then Vanessa.
I'm Vanessa, and I have a freshman who is in self-directed, gen ed, and self-contained.
Great. So I have an 8th grader going into high school. So I'm going to moderate tonight, but I have to tell you, like, I have a little bit of skin in the game tonight for the first time in one of these transition meetings. And I have Ananda Scott, president of the Shoreline Special Needs PTA, helping me with kind of the back end. And she also has a high schooler. And I also would be remiss not to recognize that Dr. Scott Irwin is in attendance. He is the director of the Secondary Student Services. If you want to just wave, Dr. Irwin. Thank you. Nice to see you as always. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Elder. She is the Shorewood assistant principal, and she can introduce her administrators.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Elder. I'm an assistant principal at Shorewood High School, and I have responsibility for most of special education at Shorewood High School. I am also the parent of a student who was served with special education up through 10th grade in the Shoreline Public Schools, and now he's a sophomore at Washington State University. With joining me tonight is the principal, Bill Dunbar, and then the special education department chair at Shorewood High School, Tammy Cisse. And then Becky, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Becky Worrell, and I am an assistant principal at Shorecrest High School. And I am, one of my responsibilities is overseeing our special ed department. So including, well, just all different parts of it. So I'm glad to be here tonight.
So Kristen, would you like Becky and I to get started with the presentation? Is that what you'd like next?
Yeah, I think that that would be great. One of my parents does need to leave at 7:45. So if I'm not sure how long your presentation is, but okay, great, perfect, awesome. Okay, thank you.
We have about 8 or 10 basic slides, and
Perfect.
then we're going to open up to questions that all of us we'll try to answer for you as best we can, and we'll field as many questions as you can ask us.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So, and Becky,
So is yours.
yeah, Becky and I are going to go back and forth. We created one presentation for the 2 high schools because there's enough similar about the 2 of us that we felt like we could do one presentation for the 2 high schools. So I'll go ahead and share screen. So high school special education, it's going to be a different experience at high school because really what we're talking about is the very next steps for your student and preparing them for whatever's beyond their post-secondary educate, their post-high school education. And so I think it's important that the very first thing we do is look at this super awesome vision for special education that was just adopted by the school board. This is meaningful to me because I was part of the committees and work in all of the different committees, and Ananda and I have spent hours and hours and hours together in this committee work, and I couldn't be more proud of what this vision says about where we would like to be with special education in Shoreline. So Shorewood High School by the numbers. I think it's important for all of you to have some numbers. So April 1st, which was our count day, we had 1,486 students at Shorewood High School. So that's head count, total number of students. We also have 160 students in our building who are served through the whole range of special education. All but 3 of those students are engaged in at least one general education class. We have 3 students who, based on their needs and based on where they're at right now, aren't able yet to engage in a special education class, yet they're still engaging in the other parts of general education. So as far as program support at Shorewood, we have a life skills program, medically fragile program, and an EBD or emotionally behavioral disorder program, and as well as directed studies. So we've got some programmatic support, and then we really have the full range of special education. When you look at Shorecrest High School, their April 2022 headcount was 1,415. They have 151 students served in special education, and all but 2 of their students have at least one general education class. They have a life skills program, a structured teaching program, an EBD program, and a directed studies program. So our high school focus really is, we want to strive to actively have the students build skills and confidence to navigate the interdependent world when they're done with us. So we want them to be able to navigate the world in a way that makes sense and is meaningful for them. Students are asked to actively participate in their IEP meetings. We want them present. We want their voice there. Our focus is really on putting together a program of coursework and activities so that they're prepared for that life after high school, whatever that is. And our students engage in the whole range of options. So 4-year college, 2-year college, trade school, job, or programs with students with people with disabilities. We're really thinking about meeting graduation requirements. So in addition to the general education coursework and waiver policies, the IEP team can determine course substitutions that might be needed. And Becky will talk a little bit about course substitution and what that's about. But then also really getting involved and having fun. There's fun. High school has this whole array of activities that all kids can engage in, and we want our students receiving special education services involved in those programs and want to provide support for that. Becky, you're up.
So as Nancy mentioned, high school comes along with graduation requirements and high school credits. And this is what it looks like for students for their 4-year graduation requirements. Now, there are a couple areas like world language and art that all students can opt to do a few less credits for that. But then also as students on IEPs, part of the conversation at the IEP meetings are about any sort of substitutions that may be needed for your student. So for an example, I was in an IEP meeting today where we decided that we were gonna substitute the world language credit for the social skills class that the student was taking. So that can look a whole lot of different ways depending what your what program your student's in. But it is part of the whole IEP team conversation. This is an example of a standard 9th grade schedule. So really, regardless what program your student is in, they're going to have English. They're going to do some math, science, usually world history one semester, health the other, and then there's room for electives. That could be, as it says there, PE, art, cooking, or world language and music, if that is an area of interest for your student as well. So thinking about the different types of classes that your student may encounter. So we have our special ed classes or our directed studies classes that are taught by a special education teacher. So you can think about that as your English skills, study skills, math skills. Those are classes that are really focused in on the reading and writing goals and that, whatever their area is on their IEP. There are also then general ed classes that are classes that have both students with IEPs and students without. And a subset of that are co-taught classes. And that is something that I know both high schools have really grown. Oops, we're getting email.
Uh-oh. What happened?
I don't know.
I'm not sharing real quick.
That's okay. But the co-taught classes are classes where students still need a little support, but they're taught by both a special education teacher and a general ed teacher. And there's a good chance that your student has probably experienced that at Kellogg or Einstein as well. But the goal is that they're getting, the support they need to focus on their IEP goal, but also in a class with, general ed students as well. So some examples that we have, I think at both schools, math, co-taught algebra 1, co-taught geometry, and I know this year at Shorecrest we were able to do co-taught algebra 2. Similar in English, co-taught English 9, English 10. Now your student is going to be placed in one of these classes if that is an area, a goal area for that. So if your student has a goal, a math goal, and they are beyond the math skills level, then they're going to go into, say, the co-taught algebra 1 or co-taught geometry, depending on their level. The target is to have 1/3 of the class be students on IEPs, and that creates a nice ratio where everybody gets the support they need. Another way that your student may get some of their support in high school is through Highlander Home. We call it HH at Shorecrest, and it's called SAS at Shorewood. But it's our advisory period that we have after our first period of the day. And sometimes some students may get minutes met there. For example, I know at Shorecrest, sometimes students that need a little bit of study skills, they'll get that support in their Highlander home versus having a whole class period to focus on that. So you may be thinking about what does the transition look like on kind of on the back end for students coming from middle school to high school. And one thing that we do is we have some communication with their current IEP managers. So we do consult the IEP managers to double check the placement of what your students signed up for. And, for example, them looking at the levels, are they, did they sign up for taught English 9? Is that what they should sign up for? Or maybe they should be in English skills, or maybe that's not a goal area and they're just in, standard English 9. So we do communicate and with that. We also do a meeting in the spring where we have a chance for current IEP managers to share any important information that we should know about your students so that we have we can create a good transition and smooth, coming up to high school. Because I think it's one of those things that parents are nervous, kids are nervous. So whatever we can do to help with that transition, we do. If your student is in one of our more structured programs or life skills, and they have a spring IEP or a spring meeting, you may see a high school representative there. We don't always guarantee that, but we do try to send a representative to spring IEPs. Or a teacher may come and observe your student if your student's in one of the more structured programs. And then finally, your student will be able to see their schedule at the end of August. So we work to put the schedule together, and then near the end of August, those become visible on Family Access. And like Nancy mentioned, one of the things about high school is fun. It's a chance for students to become more independent. It's a chance for students to get to know a lot of other kids. I think a lot of times we see at the high school level, students, really coming into their own and getting to know new people. And a lot of ways that happens is through sports. So we have at least one no-cut sport each season. And there's ADA support if your student needs that in order to participate in athletics. We do provide that. There are a lot of activities that students can be involved in as well. So I know at Shorecrest, we have tons of lunch clubs, and I know that is true at Shorewood as well. And, they range from the knitting club to the animals rights club to, you name it. And if the kids don't have the club that they want, then they start one. But we have a lot of different clubs. There's drama, there's ability to be involved in leadership. All of our students are included in assemblies and school-wide activities. So whether your student is in a more structured program, they're still coming to the assemblies if that is appropriate for them. They're still doing the school-wide activities during the Highlander home time, regardless of what program they're in. And I know that's the same at Shorewood as well. And then also lunch, as much as possible, students eat with everybody else. So I think that comment is mostly around, our structured program students who are medically fragile. And we involve them, at lunch, there are places for them to be with everybody else.
One of our focuses really around working with you and your students, and you as the caregiver, and then your student is really thinking about their post-high school planning. So high school, we're really building their skills and really focused on that. All students have a high school and beyond plan that we have to create. And so they spend time each year exploring career paths and options for after high school. So we're having conversations with all students, and then students in special education to the best of to meet their needs, and really talking about what's the goal after the 4 years of high school. Where do you as the parent and caregiver see them? Where do they see themselves? We're having those conversations. And then as part of the IEP process, we're working on the transition plan. We're required to start it by their sophomore year, but we really want to start it in 9th grade because we want that time to really work with you and work with your student to have a solid plan in place for them and choices in place for them as we're going through high school. The high school and beyond plan and the transition plan combine to really ensure that everything's in place for your student for whatever's next for them. So when we talk about possibilities for students receiving special education service, here are the options that are available to them. So it's everything from four-year college to programs with students with disabilities. So it's four-year college, two-year community college, trader certificate programs, the military, going straight into the workforce, taking a gap year, or programs within the district and then outside of the district for people with disabilities. So inside, provided by the Shoreline School District, we have two programs. We have the community-based transition program, which is housed at the community college, and those students are working on academic skills and getting internships in the community at job sites. The district-based transition program is the students there are working at district sites and getting those academic skills as well as work, job, career skills. So those are the two district options. They're intended to prepare a student for whatever's next after they're done with their public education. Your go-to people. So your go-to people in high school, all of your students will be assigned an IEP manager. We adjust caseloads in August of every year because we have students graduate, we have students continue with us. So we'll adjust caseloads. Ideally, we try to keep the same case manager with a student for the duration of high school. That's not always possible with staffing changes and shifting numbers, but we do try to. The school counselor at Shorecrest, the counselors are assigned by last name. At Shorewood, one counselor is assigned to the students in the medically fragile, served by the medically fragile program, and students is served by the life skills program. Directed study students are assigned by your last name. And then administratively, Becky is responsible for overseeing special education at Shorecrest, and I'm responsible for overseeing at Shorecrest. So now is the time for me to stop sharing and for you guys to ask us your burning questions.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was great. So I'm actually going to start with the parent questions first, if you don't mind, and as I do, then folks can start to collect your questions and put them in the chat. And they could be to either parents or to Nancy and Becky and her team. Okay, so let's get started. So for Courtney and Vanessa, how has special education been different in high school than in middle school in your perspective? So I'll start with Courtney.
For us, it has been, and we wanted this, so we're really glad that it has been this way, but there has been support for, but the expectation that Eleanor will start to take a more significant role in her own IEP planning, in her meetings, in advocacy, all of those kinds of things, that she will start to learn what her IEP really is and how that works, and how she can take that forward as she goes on to college. And it hasn't always been easy because one of her biggest struggles is self-advocacy and speaking up when she needs help. But we've been pleased with the scaffolding that she has received specifically for building that skill of learning how to advocate for herself with adults, with teachers, to say what she needs, to understand what her IEP entitles her to, so that she doesn't make the excuse in her head that she's just being a burden, or the teacher is too busy and has enough to worry about, but to really understand why she gets these supports and why it's important for her to speak up for herself, to use them. So that's been the biggest thing. In middle school, I think she relied, in my mind, a little too much on her IEP managers to help her with that. But I think as we've transitioned to high school, we've been seeing a lot of growth in that area of learning how to be her own advocate.
I love it. Thanks, Courtney. Vanessa, same question. How's special education been different in high school than in middle school in your perspective?
Well, Courtney, first, thank you. Gives me ideas. But I would say it felt very different because we felt much more heard, and it feels much more teamwork, and there are more options in high school. So there are more options for our student to be integrated, but it feels like the team, because there's so many options, the team works really to try and provide more options and really work with the parents versus having less options. So then they kind of like force you in a model. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. So Vanessa, what surprised you about your kiddos' high school experience so far, either positive or negative?
I don't know if you want to hear the negative.
So just do the positive then. Whatever, I'll leave it up to you.
No, I would
Floor
say
is yours.
it's a big transition. Okay, so our kiddos went from COVID to high school. So pretty much no middle school to high school. So that's a big transition. For any student, going to high school is a big transition. But it took a long time for a student to adjust. And I think their progress, because of a team that has been kind of like, we were all like, wow, what's going on, to really working together to put steps in place, so it was more manageable. But it's to be expected, I think, and it's a big transition for the kids, on the negative and on the positive, because I would say our student was participating in after school activities for the first 6 months before COVID. And I highly encourage that for your students. Sign them up for after school activities. That's where they connect. They're being welcomed. If not, it's harder in the classroom for the other students to reach out or to be together, but that really helps. So that's the positive, I would say. That's the positive also of seeing our student. The negative of wanting to be a teenager and being a teenager and imitating teenagers, and the positive of it, because this is normal. So it's kind of like all this, yeah. It's definitely a bigger school. It's tough at the beginning. Just be patient. It's tough, but it's good too.
Thank you. Courtney, anything that surprised you about your kiddos' high school experience so far?
I don't know if I would call it surprising because, similar to Vanessa, we have the same experience of going to 7th grade for half a school year and then, just coming back at the very tail end of 8th grade for, a month or two of part day school. So yeah, that was surprising. But I think one of the things that we have kind of always struggled with, and I think it does tend to be a little harder in high school because there are just so many more students and probably a little more distance between teachers and how often they get to see each other in different disciplines, is kind of keeping everybody on the same page and making sure that we're getting feedback every week from what's going on in school. Our kiddo is in gen ed and she's on the autism spectrum. And so one thing that we struggle with is masking, where she will seem to be going along and doing great, and then everything just kind of crashes and burns, when we know underneath the surface that, like everybody says, like swans look so elegant, but if you could see underneath the water, you'd see their feet just like going like crazy. And so we've had to work a little harder and do a little bit more experimenting to figure out a way of communicating with everyone involved in her education, to stay on the same page beyond the information that we can get from Canvas. But what has been great, and Vanessa also spoke about this, is that everyone is on board and everyone wants to find what works best. And we finally hit upon a solution of having like a Google spreadsheet that we all share. And again, speaking about that scaffolding, right now, the IEP manager, who is our kiddo's SAS teacher, is helping to send out that email every Thursday to the teachers to say, hey, could you please pop on this link and just leave a few notes? And eventually, that torch is being passed to our kiddo, so that it's becoming more and more her responsibility to touch base. But to again, we've had great experience with everyone being willing to try different things until we find the right thing that works for everyone involved.
Awesome. I love that. Courtney, I'll be talking to you about that later. So I was able to talk to actually a couple of parents, Katie being one of them, Katie Rose. She has an 11th grade kiddo in a self-contained classroom. And one of the themes that she and I kind of got to the bottom of what makes high school, I think, so different, so this is just a comment, is that in elementary school and middle school, you really are coming together as a group, right? You're very group oriented. Like in elementary school, you line up and you go different places in your group. And in middle school, I think in some ways it's kind of similar, like you kind of stay with your group. And then high school comes around and it's so much more individual. And it really is your kid's trajectory. And that has been a really positive for the parents that I talk to. So just a note, since they were not able to be here, I think that's what they would have wanted to share, is just that it's such a positive to be able to be kid-centered versus group-centered, I think. So one last question for the parents, unless there's some in the chat, which I haven't looked at yet. Courtney, what's your best advice for incoming 9th grade families, special education kids?
My best advice is take advantage of everybody's willingness to be there to support you and your students. We had a fantastic meeting in, I guess it was the end of June, like shortly after school was out, and it was a Zoom meeting, but we were able to meet with team members from middle school and people from the high school who would be involved. At that point in time, we didn't know who the IEP case manager would be, but Tammy was there kind of representing the whole special education department, as a whole. And Nancy was there, and we had a really great conversation about what our students' needs were. And so taking advantage of having an opportunity to get everybody on the same page and really understanding your kid. And I feel like the teachers have been very willing to have any information that you can give them. One of my child's peculiarities is that she kind of has her own vocabulary for how things are going. And so one day I emailed one of her teachers and said, because I felt like there was some like miscommunication going on. And I said, so just so you know, here's kind of a translation dictionary. If she's having a chicken nugget day, that means it's like things are going really bad. But if she says potato, it means everything's okay. So, I mean, just things like that, everyone is like so happy to have that information and to just share whatever you think you need to share about your kids' particular interests or idiosyncrasies, because everybody wants to know, because they all want to help.
That's one of the parents that I had talked to. She also, at the beginning of each semester, or, when she has new teachers for her kiddo, they'll do a sheet that basically tells about that kiddo. And she has said that that's been really helpful. Vanessa, what advice would you give ninth grade families?
Well, I would say same thing. We also read the sheet for the teachers and communication, and really telling the teachers that we're a team. So if they have questions or frustrations, they're also allowed to talk to us directly and not only count on the case manager who's already loaded with zillions of things. But again, I would say, well, I said it already, but having your kid involved in extracurricular activity really is a big thing. And we had good experience of our child being welcomed, very welcomed, and things being adjusted for a child and so on. And because that's where, we're talking about suddenly they're alone in this sea of people, and they're changing class all the time, so they don't have any point of reference anymore. But the club or the extracurricular become the only point of reference that they will have every day. And it's going to be after school every day with the same people, with coaches, or with our child says, oh, the drama club is my family. So it's just like my point of reference. This is my group. So it does help.
For the administrators, are clubs and classes before school or during school? In middle school, it's after school, always.
So most of our clubs are during lunchtime, and then sports are after school. And then, but you'll see some activities like drama's a class and an activity. So we do two big play productions a year, and it's very, very, very inclusive. The spring play, she often double casts the play, and everybody gets a part.
Awesome.
And ADA supports available if your child needs it to be able to participate in those things. So we want to make sure that your student is able to participate in the whole host of activities that are available to high school students, because it really does create a rich experience.
What's amazing for that, I would think for some special education families, after school might be therapies or whatnot, but they can still participate in clubs during school. So that's great. I have a little list of questions, but let's start going through the parent questions that have come in through chat. One of the questions that we got was, how many students are in one class, and is it combined? Are there multiple grades in one class? I think is what the question is.
I can answer that. It depends on the class. Okay, so in like your elective classes like art, like the cooking classes, you'll have freshmen through seniors in those classes, in those elective classes. In your core classes, it's often by grade level, like English, math, social studies, science, but not necessarily. In your special education classes, you might have older kids and younger kids in the same English skills class. So it really depends on the courses that your child is scheduled in and taking. But it's one of the things I think we want to be really clear about is the kids are great, right? And so warm, welcoming, caring young people. And so it doesn't really matter what grade level your child's in if they're all taking intro to art together. They're all struggling with the same thing, right? And so that's really important.
Thank you. Here's a question that came in, and I want to clarify. So it says, how are students assigned to either of the two schools? So I think what the clarification might be is, I know that it's, boundaries, right? But then additionally, in some self-contained classrooms, is there, I think there's a choice, because one of our panelists had a choice between what school their child is going to go to, and actually toured both of those schools. So can you talk a little bit more about that, Nancy or Becky?
It's more medically fragile. We have the equipment, the room, all of the stuff. And so if your student has medical conditions that require specialized care, it's likely that's where you'll end up at Shorewood. So I think that's what I've seen the most of, is it has to do with the student's medical needs, and then they end up at Shorewood.
Okay. And that's a team decision, right?
Yeah, all placement decisions are team decisions. Let's be super clear about that.
Yes.
But we want to make sure that we've got the student in the right space with the right, if they have special equipment needs and all of those things, we have to figure that out.
Awesome. And then a question came in for Courtney and Vanessa. What are some of the best strategies or ways you prepared your student for the transition? So Vanessa, I know you're getting ready probably to take off. I'll let you answer this real quick.
Well, my student has two older siblings, so that helped. So I can only speak of that kind of experience, because we always talked about high school, and my student was going to be with their sibling at school. So that's a lot of excitement and a lot of joy. We went, and maybe a suggestion will be to bring your child to a soccer game or to the play, to the drama that's coming, or to a band concert or something, to see, oh, these are the things you're going to do. Maybe asking for permission to walk through the school a little bit, or that kind of thing, to understand a little, to see the fun of the school, the fun side of the school. Go to a basketball game, or it's not basketball season anymore, but just something like that, and really preparing them in talking about, you're going to have many teachers, and when you get the list, these are all the teachers. And we had made also a very clear schedule, because this thing of changing every other day, they change schedules. And every day before going to school, showing our student before getting on the bus, this is what you're doing today, which room, and repeating it over and over. So then it's not a big mystery. When they arrive, they're ready, they're prepared. So that's more at the beginning of the year. But during the summer, before the summer, I would say, if you can go to a few activities of high school, go for it, to observe and enjoy. And then during the summer, really talk about longer classes, less classes per day. So that's the positive. You have less classes, so you have less homework in one go, and yeah, trying to prepare them that way. But no matter what, it's a little bit of a shock to the system. But again, I would say I have to go, but I would say that the team, at least the team we have, is really awesome. So that's really, it bring, I think, safety to the parents to see that the teachers are very aware of how big the change is.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Goodbye, everybody. Sorry.
Bye.
Oh.
So Courtney, same question. How did you prepare your kiddo?
I would echo everything that Vanessa said. Like, we did come up to the high school for some different activities, and our kiddo had an opportunity to do honor choir as an elementary school student. And so she'd already been up there, to perform in the auditorium and that kind of thing. And so having some familiarity with the building already was helpful. And then when schedules were ready before school opened, we also took advantage of the opportunity to come up and take a tour with her IEP manager once we knew who that was going to be. And so we walked the schedule and saw all of the areas of the building and talked about, how is lunchtime going to work? How do you get your food? What's the process for, going through the lunch line and that kind of thing. We went to all the different offices. So where's the nurse? What do you do if you don't feel well? Here's the attendance office. We kind of talk about all the situations that might occur with that. Like, what if you have to have an appointment? And so here's where you bring your note, or if you're tardy or late to school for some reason, you have to come to this office first before you go to class. Just kind of trying to hit on the different situations that might be confusing or complicated, based on like who's going to be your biggest help in that situation. Trying to kind of anticipate those and compartmentalize them into like main office, attendance office, nurse, IEP manager, who handles what, who's going to be your biggest help in these different situations, and talking about that, and giving her opportunities to kind of write down the things that she was worried about, and then addressing those things. And again, saying, okay, there are all of these people on your team who are on your side in this school, not just people directly on your team, but people who have your back, who, you maybe don't even see every day, but if you really needed them, this is who you would go to. And making sure that she understood what everybody's role is in helping her be successful, so she would know who to ask.
I love that. So that was one of my questions, actually, is can you take a tour before? So it sounds like you contacted your case manager and that's how you were able to do that tour. So that's a great tip.
I wanted to add one thing also. We have the benefit of having supportive therapy at home. And the school is also very accommodating about letting Eleanor bring her BCBA and her BA or her BT with her to go on the tour, so
Awesome.
that they could see the facility that she would be in, and they could be there for support if she felt kind of overwhelmed by the nervousness of being at the school. And we've also had really great communication between home therapy and school.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so another question came in, and part of this I think was already answered. So I'm going to skip it. Part of the question was, what determines what high school my child will go to? And I think that was already answered. And does the IEP team determine which is the better fit based on the program supported? So I think that we did answer that question. But I just wanted to, for the parent that sent that in, thank you for sending that in. Here's a great question. Who selects elective courses during the process of high school registration? And are they selected by the IEP case managers? So Becky, let's call on you.
Yeah, I'll address that. So in general, it's going to be the student. I say that like if your student is in mostly general education classes, you probably just went through the process of doing online registration. For our students who are in more structured programs or are, a little more self-contained, they generally work with the parent, the counselor, the student to identify the electives that make sense, for that student to do, whether that's a PE or foods or that. But in general, the student and the family get to make the request for what they want to take. And also at the IEP meetings, that's a big conversation about like, what is their long-term plan? What do they want to try out to kind of figure out what they might want to do out after high school. So it comes up a lot at all the IEPs as well.
Perfect. Okay, so here's a great question that came in, and it goes along with a question that I also had, or that I had asked. I was told that once my child got an IEP status, that I would need to advocate for them. And they suggested that I would sometimes be lowballed and that I would need to fight for what I believe they need. What exactly does it mean to advocate for them? I don't want my child getting the low end of what the school has to offer them. And that kind of went along with the question that I had, which would be, what's the role of the caregiver in high school? What is our role as caregivers?
We want to partner with you to help your child achieve whatever it is they want to do after high school. We are adamant that all students have access to whatever rigor looks like for them. Right? And so and Anonda's heard me preach this. It's important to us that all kids have access to gen ed and whatever gen ed looks like for them. We understand that some of the students supported by some of the programs, based on their needs, they may have more special ed than gen ed coursework, but they should still, based on whatever it is they're going to do, have access to those gen ed opportunities. If your child's going to vote, they should sit in a civics class and a US history class, period. The level of guardianship that you might pursue or not pursue is important in the conversation about what courses they take. All of that stuff's really important. But the lowball thing, we don't go there. We want all kids to have access to rigor that meets their needs.
And I would just reiterate the partnership, and I think one of the parents mentioned earlier too, it's like, it really is a team and a partnership, and advocating for your student is, sharing what you think they need, and the team comes together and talks about it and figures out how to support your student.
So just to reiterate, so in high school, I think maybe some of caregivers, we think that our role is going to be to step back and let the kiddo handle it, right? Like they need to learn to do this for themselves. But just to reiterate, I think what you're saying is that you are still very much a partner in your child's education in high school. Okay, excellent. Okay, so if a child, or I guess young adult at this point, I can tell I've been doing a lot of these meetings for younger kids. This is my first high school one. But if your young adult is really struggling either academically or with mental health, where should the student go for help, and how can the parents support that help? I understand that that mental health is a big subject in our district right now. We're talking a lot about that. So I would love to know kind of how would parents help their kid get help, or how can the kid get help?
Well, I would say if the primary concern is mental health, they would start with their school counselor. I mean, IEP manager is a good resource as well, but when it comes to kind of the mental health, it would be coordinating with or talking with the school counselor. And then if there are questions about who can, then kind of take it from there and either help get some support set up or help refer out to some resources or that kind of thing. And then for academic help, that may be starting with the IEP manager or the counselor or, some combination there, depending on what the concern is.
Okay. So specifically back to clubs, if a parent needs for their child, or if their child needs support to attend either a club or a sport, who do they talk to get that support? Whether that's like, for example, like a track team, maybe the kiddo needs a one-on-one to help support their kid in track, or they need another adult. Who exactly do they ask for that help?
Start with the IEP manager, because there's a form an IEP manager has to fill out to request it.
Great.
Start there. And then Becky and I have to hire it.
Okay. So if they thought perhaps that was necessary, maybe a couple months leeway might be in order. Is that correct? Right? Like,
yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Okay. So volunteer hours come into play in high school. So how do students in special education complete those, and what are some of the ways that those students have completed those hours? Because it may look very different than their general ed peers.
I'll talk about that. I actually work a lot with our special ed kiddos at Shorewood, and we try to find things that are close to their neighborhood or actually in our building. Like today, I had 3 young men changing our hall calendar. It's an entire wall, and they use their own time to do it. And so they get volunteer hours for that each month when they change it out for me. They have to climb a ladder and the whole thing. So it's quite a production. So they definitely earn the hours, but we try to find different ways to do it where it's supported, but they're still doing the volunteer work. It's safe. And they're getting, the joy of volunteering out of it.
Yeah, and I'm assuming there's different levels of support that
100%.
kiddos would need, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at Shorewood, I'm sure it's the same at Shorecrest. We have a great career center with support there, and they have, I know on our website, I'm sure it's the same at Shorecrest, can't imagine it would be different, lists of different volunteer activities, and some are scaffolded, some are completely independent. It's just depending on what your student wants to do and what they want to be involved in.
Awesome. I had one last question that came into the chat, and I'll start with you, Tammy. What's the best next step forward for caregivers after today for a smooth transition? Like, we have a little bit of a runway,
Yeah.
But it's coming.
Yeah, you bet. Right now, I'm already receiving, as a department chair at Shorewood, emails from the IEP teams at Einstein. That's our feeder school. And we're setting up meetings to talk about transition, about the appropriate classes for kids to register, setting up times to meet the families that are coming in. And I would say that probably would be the first step, ask the questions that you're thinking, because we probably have a quick answer because we've been doing this a little bit. And that would help you ease your mind so you don't go into the summer going, oh my goodness, what is my kiddo going to do in September when they go to those big schools? But yeah, I would talk to your current IEP manager. We know them. They can reach out to us and we can ease questions. It's pretty easy to send a quick email and we can help with that transition. And like Courtney said, we're happy, and Vanessa said, because they came in for visits and we showed them around Shorewood where, you know, it wasn't so stressful with 1,500 kids together. But we're happy to set up visits to go through so kiddos can come to find the next school as part of their life in a home that they're going to be in for 4+ years.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Bill, I noticed that you had you're unmuted. Did you have some insight?
I would make a contribution. I'm really excited for the next group of students to come to us, and listening to the comments today. I think it's a great community of students, as Nancy pointed out, in that the students kind of help each other adjust, kind of spinning off of what Courtney said, that, you know, it has been a tough year with all the time online, and the, you know, the students who often set the best example, it was a tough transition for them too. So don't feel like that's unique to special education students at all. It's been a highly unusual time of year. I'd circle back to something Tammy said, and said a really great thing to do is spend some time with the high school course catalog. And just a quick overview of the first few pages of it gives you the notion of like, what's the structure of a high school? What's the general program that we're trying to achieve? And I'd support what my colleagues have said by saying we're really looking for the highest level academic outcome for all of the students, as close to standard graduation requirements as we can have, with the fullest experience across activities and academics and inclusion. And then, the same goal for your students as all students is we really want you as families and students to have some choices. So that full spectrum of, what comes after high school, that the student can be engaged with some exploration and choice finding. So that question about, will you have to advocate? My answer would be all of the caregivers are a part of our team, and that we really want you engaged in the conversation, and we want the students to develop that self-advocacy and be thinking about what they want to do after high school as they're passing through our system. And then I know both schools really work, they're good places. The outcomes are really great on both sides of the district for our students with IEP. So welcome aboard. It's fun. It's been fun to listen to my colleagues talk about the program, and really excited to see your students as they join us at Shorewood and Shorecrest.
Kirsten, I got a direct question in the chat that I'd like to answer.
Yes.
So there's a question about the ratio of ADA support and in the special education classroom in addition to the special education teacher. I think we need to clarify what ADA support is, because we're flipping around terms for y'all, like you know what it means. So ADA support is support. ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act. And so ADA support is additional support above and beyond the IEP, your student's IEP, to be able to participate and give access to activities that aren't directly serviced by the IEP. So think about sports participation, drama practice, cheerleading, all of those other activities that go on at high school that your student might want to participate in. If they need additional support, it's essentially a different pot of money, sort of. And so it's a different kind of support, and it's not connected. It's not written into your student's IEP per se. Okay. And when we talk about, and I think the question is about what kind of support's available in classrooms for students in addition to the special education teacher. So realize that our skills classes, our special education classes, are smaller, intentionally smaller than other classes. So they're about, I think our largest class size is about 15, okay, for a skills class. And then some students come with their own support. We have a number of students who have one-to-one support. We also have additional staff paraeducator staff, behavior tech staff that we sprinkle around the building, providing support depending on what the needs are in a particular classroom. So Scott is gracious with our staffing, using the numbers and wiggling the numbers so that we're able to figure out how to have that support throughout the building. So we use we have one-to-one paraeducators. We also have behavior techs. We also have other paraeducators supporting students throughout in both the general education setting as well as the special education settings.
Great. Yeah, good, great clarification. That was a great question. I'm not really seeing any other questions coming to me, and if no one else has any questions, then I will just say,
can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Well, so it's the same thing that we have to work with our kiddo on. And this kind of speaks to that whole, do I have to really push to advocate for my kid? We always tell our kiddo, if you don't tell somebody that there's a problem or that you need help, they don't know. And any time that we have reached out and said, everything might look okay at school, but we are just really struggling at home because our kiddo is coming home and exhausted and just angry, and all of the work that she and all the effort she's putting into school is really making home life untenable. Everyone has been willing to say, okay, what do we need to do? How do we adjust this so that you can be supportive at home and she can unwind at home and feel comfortable there. And it really has just come down to us reaching out and saying, we need to have a team meeting. We need, we're having a problem that maybe you're not seeing. And we need help, and we'd like to troubleshoot and problem solve. And so I think as long as you keep that communication open and you say, this is the problem we're having, can you help? Nobody has ever said, no, we just can't do that. That's too much or whatever. That has never been an issue.
Thank you so much for that insight. I really appreciate that. I have to say, after running quite a few of these transition meetings, I think that the general theme that I get is we are a team, and the administrators and your teachers and the parents, they really all want to work together as a team to support your student. So thank you so much. I so appreciate Becky and Nancy and Bill. I really appreciate you coming, and Scott. Courtney, thank you so much for being a parent, and Tammy. I've really appreciated your insight as well. I'll see you soon, I'm sure. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording.